Checkpoint next.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere nei. Auckland Mayor and self-proclaimed Mr Fix-It drops a spanner in the stock exchange's works, forcing a freeze on Auckland Airport shares after he speculated out loud about the company. All the Coromandel wants for Christmas is some better weather. We're live to the region that's taking another soaking. Our most successful Black Caps captain hands over the reins. He won a raffle to travel anywhere in the world that he wanted. Guess where John from Colorado ended up? And raising money to support pricks everywhere. The Prime Minister and Ardern Seymour join forces over that insult. Don't forget, you can catch us live, Sky Channel 83, Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Aiahi Marie, good afternoon. I'm Evie Ashton. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown has come under fire for speculating about a potential new Auckland Airport terminal. His public comments forced the stock exchange to briefly halt trading in the airport's shares. During a live-streamed council meeting, Mr Brown said the airport was planning a major capital raise to fund a new domestic terminal, and that in turn would dilute the council's 18% shareholding in the company. Councillor Chris Darby was the first to question where the Mayor got his information.
Has that been announced to the market, your suggestion, Mayor?
I think
we're talking about a publicly listed company here. I'm not aware of Auckland Airport announcing a capital raising.
No, I don't think they have announced it yet, but you don't have to be particularly forward-looking to see that that's coming.
In a near-unanimous vote, the Council has agreed to put the Mayor's annual budget proposal out for consultation in March. Aucklanders will now get the chance to have their say on ways of meeting a budget shortfall of nearly $300 million. The proposal includes a potential rates rise of 4.66%. The Mayor of New Plymouth says investors will be driven away by delay in offering future onshore oil and gas exploration permits. The government is deferring the decision on whether to make such offers to the next parliamentary term. Neil Holdham says ministers need to be more upfront about their plans.
They want to drip feed in changes in policy which are really the kind of behaviour that drives investors away.
On the other hand, Neil Holdham welcomes the government's commitment to scaling up the renewable energy sector, including creating a regulatory environment for offshore wind. A major new report by the Abuse and Care Inquiry says the Child and Adolescent Unit of Lake Alice Psychiatric Hospital in the 1970s was a place of misery, neglect, terror, fear and torment. It says psychiatrist Selwyn Leeks, in particular, used electroconvulsive therapy not as a treatment but as a punishment that was abusive and unjustified, even by the standards of the day. One of those punished that way, Paul Zentfeld, believes the report will be an eye-opener for anyone who reads it.
Not an insult anymore. This is a victory for the survivors, for all survivors. There's going to be a lot of tears spilt today from the survivors. Justice will be served.
Paul Zenfeld says survivors have been waiting for this historic day for a long time. An apprentice jockey died after falling from her horse during a race in Ashburton this afternoon. Several other riders were involved in the collision that killed 26-year-old Megan Taylor. The chief executive of Thoroughbred Racing, Bruce Sharrock, says it's a tragedy.
My thoughts are with her family, those who knew Megan extremely well throughout the racing community. It's a tragic event. It's a life taken way too soon, and the industry is in mourning.
One other rider was taken to Ashburton Hospital with moderate injuries, and two others were treated for minor injuries at the scene. Bruce Sharrock says the Racing Integrity Board will investigate what happened. A saturated Coromandel region is enjoying a slight reprieve from the rain after a day of road closures, slips and flooding. 300 millimetres has fallen in the past 2 days. Civil Defence Controller Gary Towler says the ground is soaked and any new rain quickly floods the surface.
There's still a lot of road closures, Fletcher's Bay, up around Colville and all those smaller roads. We're urging anyone who's got holiday properties up there to check before they do depart. But apart from that, all our main roads, we expect them to be open late this afternoon, early this evening.
All state highways in the area have been reopened. And in Banks Peninsula, power has been restored to nearly 3,000 homes following a widespread outage of several hours today. To sport now, and the workload that comes with captaincy has finally taken its toll on Black Caps skipper Kane Williamson. He's stepping down after 6 years in the role, but will continue to lead the one-day and T20 sides. Tim Southey will become the Black Caps' 31st Test captain and lead the side on the upcoming tour of Pakistan. Williamson led the team in 38 tests, including 22 wins, taking the side to number 1 in the world rankings at the start of 2021 and going on to win the World Test Championship. With 2 World Cups on the horizon over the next couple of years, he felt something had to give.
I do love captaincy and the elements that it brings, but it does require that energy, and so I've never seen it as a forever job as well. So actually just taking a little bit of that off and sharing that, I think is important.
Morocco's fairy tale run at the Football World Cup is over, beaten 2-0 by defending champs France in the semi-finals. France will play Argentina in Monday morning's final. Only Italy and Brazil have won consecutive World Cups. The Breakers have had to pull out of their Australian NBL basketball clash against the Wildcats in Perth tomorrow because of a COVID outbreak. 7 players have tested positive. And 76 nominations have been received for the annual Hallberg Awards. Headlining the list are Winter Olympic gold medalists Nico Porteous and Zoe Sadowski-Synnott and the World Cup winning Black Ferns. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights on Our Changing World, science journalist Peter Griffin on MethaneSat, a satellite that can detect and measure methane emission hotspots. Hopefully not your bathroom. Keyboardist Eddie Rayner chooses a piece of classical music to celebrate 75 years of the NZSO. And Carol Bow from the Women's Bookshop with her summer reading recommendations. Roll on summer on Nights with Karen Hay after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And we're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're with Lisa Owen next on Checkpoint. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Northland and Auckland, fine spells, isolated showers. Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty, periods of rain with some heavy falls, easing tomorrow evening. From Waikato to Wellington, including the Central High Country, also from Gisborne to Wairirapa. Occasional rain easing this evening. Scattered showers tomorrow, mainly in the afternoon, when some could be heavy with possible thunderstorms. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, occasional rain today, a few showers tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, rain at times, possibly heavy with thunderstorms tomorrow morning in Fiordland and elsewhere tomorrow afternoon and evening. For Canterbury, scattered rain clearing this evening. Cloudy tomorrow with isolated showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms south of Ashburton in the afternoon. For Otago and Southland, cloudy periods, scattered showers in the afternoons and evenings with thunderstorms and hail possible. And at Kohu, Chatham Islands, low cloud, drizzle from this evening. The time is 7 minutes past 5. I'll have news headlines and traffic news for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, nau mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The Auckland Mayor and self-proclaimed Mr Fix-It threw a spanner in the works at the Stock Exchange today, forcing a trading halt on Auckland Airport shares. During a live-streamed council meeting, Wayne Brown said the airport was planning a major capital raise to fund a new domestic terminal, and that in turn would dilute the council's 18% shareholding in the company. Big announcements that could change the value of listed companies' shares are supposed to be made through the share market, so no one gets an unfair financial advantage. The Mayor immediately went into damage control, releasing a statement saying he was only speculating. Our reporter Finn Blackwell was at the meeting.
Mayor Brown told councillors he wished he could be giving them a Christmas present. Instead, a lump of coal, suggesting shares in Auckland Airport would be further diluted without them contributing to a new, unannounced terminal.
The dilution's almost inevitable. They're about to go to a major raising to fund a new domestic airport, and we will not be contributing to that, so our 18% will soon become about 11 or 10, and at that stage it becomes less and less strategic.
New information sending the markets into a spin, something that was instantly questioned by Councillor Chris Darby.
Has that been announced to the market, your suggestion, Mayor?
I think
we are talking about a publicly listed company here. I'm not aware of Auckland Airport announcing a capital raising.
No, I don't think they have announced it yet, but you don't have to be particularly forward-looking to see that that's coming.
The Mayor's spokesman rushed out a statement saying he was merely speculating on how the airport might finance its ambitious capital expenditure program. Auckland Airport was also forced to quickly explain it had no plans to carry out an equity raise. No announcement, nothing to see here. Speaking later to media, an irritated mayor attempted to explain his comments.
Any informed person can make a suggestion. I didn't make a statement on behalf of anything. I'm just a person who looks out there and sees what I think.
The council was meeting to decide whether to press on with the mayor's plans for cost savings to plug a $295 million hole. Councillors agreed to open up consultation on the budget plan, with just one voting against, Councillor Josephine Bartley. Wayne Brown says prudent behaviour is absolutely essential when managing the council's finances.
We've been borrowing increasing amounts for many years, and you cannot borrow your way to wealth. We should all be aiming to maximise the other levers and minimise the amount that we need to draw down with debt, especially as it makes things worse next year and the year after.
While the meeting was supposed to be centred on where cuts can be made, the mayor seemed agitated. Media questions surrounded his own faux pas about the airport.
All the way through my campaign, I suggested interest rates will rise and there will be a much larger level of inflation than anyone expected. All the way through the campaign, media questioned that and said, you're not right. And it's turned out that I was dead right.
The mayor says the focus should be on selling the shares, which haven't returned anything in 3 years.
Well, joining us now is Mark Lister from investment advisor firm Craig's Investment Partners. Hi, Mark. Can you just explain in simple terms what it was that the mayor has done wrong here?
Yeah, good evening. Look, I think the issue here is that Auckland Airport is a publicly listed company, listed on the stock exchange, which means there are very, very tight regulations about disclosing any information that the public might not know and that sort of thing. So even if he was just speaking off the cuff and really just saying what's on his mind without any sort of real, substance behind it, in the sense that the airport hasn't got any plans of that nature. The NZX, which is the stock market operator and also the regulator, they had to put the stock into trading halt simply from a precautionary perspective, because they'll hear that sort of comment and they'll think, well, hang on, Auckland Council is one of the major shareholders, so we've had this comment. Is there something that he knows that the rest of us don't know? So they would have had, their hands would have been tied, and they really would have needed to halt the trading until there was a bit of clarity out there, which is what's happened, and no real harm done at the end of it, but it's probably not great that they've had to disrupt the market like that. So I think he'll maybe have to choose his words a bit more carefully next time.
Yeah, the thing is, I wonder how much of a misstep is it from him, in the sense that he prides himself on being a well-seasoned businessman?
Oh, look, it's probably not a showstopper. It's probably disappointing from his perspective that it has become the focal point of the day, when he actually had some quite important messages that he wanted to deliver and discuss, and he would probably be rather them getting the attention rather than the short-lived Auckland Airport trading halt and the company having to be distracted enough to come out and clarify things, and then it reopens. That's probably not where he wanted sort of the day's focus to be. But look, the lesson for him next time, I suppose, will be just be a bit careful with his wording, given the fact that Auckland Airport is a publicly listed entity and is governed by all of those trading rules.
Where's the line really between speculation and stating it in such a way that it seems that you know what's going on? Because there's no if, buts and maybes in what he said. He said that they're about to go to a major raising to fund a new domestic airport. Our shares will be diluted. They're 18% now, and he very specifically said they'll soon be 10 to 11%. So he gave very specific details and this sort of out loud musings. So where is the line?
Yeah, that's true, and that's probably what got the attention of the regulator. The specifics probably made them think, maybe there is something in this. It turns out there doesn't seem to be. The airport's come out and said, no, nothing to see here. Move along, please. And I think all of the analysts out there and fund managers, there's no talk in the market of a capital raising coming. Auckland Airport did a really big one when COVID first hit, and they raised more than they needed to. So they're pretty well capitalised, and they've got debt available to them to do all the things they need to do. So I don't think there's any likelihood of a capital raising on the horizon. Why the Mayor has been quite specific in terms of those numbers, I couldn't tell you, but that is probably what got a few people's attention. It sounded a little too specific to be just a throwaway comment. Maybe it's just getting a little bit excitable, sort of trying to push the point he was trying to make, which actually has some merit. I don't disagree with the point he's trying to make, but he's maybe just not chosen his words as carefully as he could have.
In his press conference after the council meeting, he said he's not going to apologise. It hasn't cost anyone anything. Is he right?
Yeah, I guess he's right. I mean, trading was disrupted for an hour or two, I think. Not a major. It's sort of quiet this time of year. Probably just doesn't look great.
And does inconvenience have a price as well for Auckland Airport and the stock exchange?
Yeah, absolutely. And a few people at Auckland Airport probably had their day interrupted. So a few of the management team and the PR team and the comms team had to sort of scramble around and go, hang on, what's going on here, guys? Let's get something out. So it would have been a distraction and a bit of a disruption for them. The market would have been left a little bit confused. Some of the brokers maybe were a bit inconvenienced. People that were maybe trying to buy or sell at that particular time would have been inconvenienced. But the share price moved from start of the day to end of the day pretty minimal, and I think it'll be forgotten soon enough. But yeah, just a bit of a faux pas, isn't it?
Yeah, on that, Mark, when you do something like this that literally stops share trading for a particular company, do you get a call from anyone saying, hey, next time? What would you expect in terms of repercussions, or perhaps a please explain, or even a telling off?
Oh, well, he probably hasn't made any friends sort of at the airport itself. You know, they would rather be controlling the messages they want to send about their plans and what they're doing and how they're spending their money. So it's probably caught them by surprise, and I suspect they would have rather not have to go through that. So, you know, maybe there's a few words behind the scenes between the Mayor's office and the Auckland Airport management team or PR team or board, who knows. I think the Mayor will probably reflect and think, you know, that's not what I wanted to be on the sort of 5:15 news on Checkpoint. You know, there are other things I would rather be getting coverage.
Appreciate your time, Mark. That's Mark Lister, who's from Craig's Investment Partners. It is almost 17 after 5. Kia mau tunu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The Coromandel's been hit again with widespread surface flooding, multiple slips and closed roads, just days before the summer holidaymakers descend. Key arterial routes were knocked out for much of the day, though most have reopened or partly reopened now. As Libby Kirkby-McLeod found out, it's become a familiar scene for locals.
Around 300 millimetres of rain has fallen on already sodden ground in parts of the Coromandel. John lives in Tairua. When he returned from dinner in Whitianga last night, there was already water across the road, and there was more to come.
I got up as usual at 5:30 this morning to start work at Prescott's Garage, and found the roads were closed. So, wasn't impressed. It's not great for the Coromandel in general.
Staff who could get to work in the garage at Hikuwai say the weather is bad, but that isn't out of the ordinary lately.
The roads are all closed. We're flooded. It flooded worse than this about 2 weeks ago. But the rain's not stopping, so maybe, who knows.
Civil Defence Controller Gary Towler knows a thing or two. He says the region has had so much rain lately that the ground is soaked, and any new rain quickly floods the surface.
Mercury Bay North, there's still a lot of road closures, Fletchers Bay, up around Colville and all those smaller roads. We're urging anyone who's got holiday properties up there to check before they do depart. But apart from that, all our main roads, we expect them to be open late this afternoon, early this evening.
Some water is reducing and roads are reopening, so most people are able to travel this weekend. But the Met Service forecasts more rain next week. It's not what the new owner of Hot Water Beach's Seabreeze Holiday Park, Deborah, wants to hear. It's her first summer on the Coromandel and she's hoping it will be blue skies for Christmas. In the meantime, they're providing warm, dry cabins for visitors who don't mind a few puddles. Guests at the park today weren't letting the rain get them down.
Well, we just had some come and get some shovels to go to Hot Water Beach. They're going to brave it. So, yeah, they're going to just go anyway. Because, hey, you're wet, why not be warm and wet? And it's probably a good time because there's not so many people in there.
Deputy Mayor for Thames Coromandel District Council, Terry Walker, says they've been providing locals with updates on road closures, slips, flooding and what schools might be hard to get to. He's looking on the bright side.
This is just the starter pack and it's going to clear and the farmers will be happy with lots of water and I hope people are harvesting for their tanks and getting them full. And we're going in for a great summer. The Hutakawas are flowering and we're looking forward to a wonderful hot summer period.
And he might just get his wish. The forecast is for the sun to start shining from Christmas Eve.
It is 19 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback about anything you've heard on the program this evening. Get in touch about Wayne Brown's faux pas or even his budget, which has been voted through to the consultation phase. He's wanting to sell off the airport shares and cut millions and millions of dollars of spending from Auckland Transport, the events arm and Eke Panuku. Or if you're on the Coromandel, let us know what conditions are like there. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Let's go to the headlines now. Anea Iwi mena pita kōrero.
The Racing Integrity Board will investigate how a 26-year-old apprentice jockey died after falling from her horse during a race in Ashburton this afternoon. Several other riders were involved in the collision that killed Megan Taylor. Karen Parsons, who owns the horse Ms Taylor was riding, says it was a terrible event with 4 horses falling. WorkSafe has been notified and the death will be referred to the coroner. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown has come under criticism for speculating about a potential new Auckland Airport terminal. His public comments forced the stock exchange to briefly halt trading in the airport's shares today. During a live-streamed council meeting, Mr Brown said the airport was planning a major capital raise to fund a new domestic terminal, and that would dilute the council's 18% shareholding in the company. Power has been restored to nearly 3,000 homes in Canterbury's Banks Peninsula after a widespread outage this afternoon. The Christchurch City Council earlier asked residents not to flush toilets, shower or wash as it couldn't pump water into its storage reservoirs. Electricity provider Orion says the problem was a faulty insulator on the high voltage line feeding the area which needed to be replaced. And the US Central Bank has announced the 7th rise in interest rates this year. The Federal Reserve put up rates by 0.5 percentage point. Interest rates in the US are heading to a level not seen since the steep economic downturn in 2007. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, all the roads in the Coromandel have now reopened after earlier closing because of heavy rain. And in the central North Island, the work on the desert road between Waiuru and Rangipo has taken longer than expected because of the weather. State Highway 1 in that area won't reopen now until 7 o'clock tonight. Our next news headlines and traffic is at 5:40.
Kia ora rā e ho. The Black Caps will usher in a new split captaincy set up when the opening test against Pakistan begins in Karachi on Boxing Day. After 6 years leading the side in all 3 formats, Kane Williamson has opted to step down as test match skipper. He's been replaced by veteran seam bowler Tim Southey and says it was a decision made after several months of talks with New Zealand cricket.
I do love captaincy and the elements that it brings, but it does require that energy, and so I've never seen it as a forever job as well. So actually just taking a little bit of that off and sharing that I think is important. So it actually came down to a little bit looking at next year with the World Cup around the corner, and basically it unfolded like that. So for me, it's a tough decision purely with the attachment to and love for the test game, and I see it as the pinnacle, but also I see that real positive element.
And joining us now is sports reporter Clay Wilson. OK, Clay, a lot of chatter about this for a while, so why is it happening now and why test match cricket?
Yeah, it's probably been a couple of years that this has been discussed, talked about at various levels, but Kane Williamson, as he's very good at doing on the field, has played a straight bat, padded away these questions very adeptly. it's got to a point now where I think probably the schedule is so busy and he's at a stage of his life, he's 32 years old now, that they think this is the right time to do it. He's also, the last 12 months, his form has been up and down by his own lofty standards. I mean, by other people's standards, he'd probably be pretty happy with it, but he has had his struggles with form and also with injury. How much that came into it, he wasn't really saying. But when you think about how busy the schedule is and all the responsibilities that come with being a captain, not only are you playing yourself, you have to take charge of the tactics on the field, the tactics off the field, the media, the marketing responsibilities that come with that. And as a test match captain, the game goes for 5 days sometimes. So it's a lot on one person. He's also a father now. So a lot that comes into it in terms of trying to prolong his career, I guess. That's the idea of this. They want to prolong his career at international level and hope he continues playing at a high standard. Interesting in this is that they've gone for Tim Southee as a replacement, because the person that's mostly stepped into this role when Kane Williamson hasn't captained the Test team and has been absent has been Tom Latham. Mm-hmm. Tom Latham's also younger at 30 years old. Tim Southee, 34. Quite an older age to be taking over as a Test captain, you would think, but obviously has that experience, so they seem to be happy with that decision. Doing something like this, splitting the captaincy up, it's really following the lead of a lot of the other big teams around the world, and also other teams have done or are in the process of splitting also the coaching role. And that did come up today about Coach Gary Stead and what would be happening with him. And here's what David White had to say, basically confirming that was on the cards for the Black Caps.
Gary's current contract runs through to the Cricket World Cup in 23. But we have had conversations about that possibility in the future. I think it's something that might happen in the future. But like all things we do, we kind of discuss it as a group. It's not one person making a unilateral decision.
It does seem to be, like I say, the modern way, or it's going in that direction for a lot of teams. So in terms of the Black Caps, perhaps seems like it is the best thing to not only do this with the captaincy, but also to start considering it and talking about it with the coaching as well.
Oh, maybe that's the solution for the All Blacks.
Perhaps.
Anyway, also, while we're sticking with cricket, some other news today of interest in New Zealand cricket fans, yeah?
Yeah, so this is about Spark Sport, and Spark Sport, of course, has had its ups and downs, and people that have been at various levels of satisfaction with the streaming service during its time. But Spark Sport has the rights for all the Black Caps, White Ferns and domestic matches played here in New Zealand. So it's big for New Zealand cricket fans. That's where they watch the Black Caps and the White Ferns when they play in New Zealand. Report today of a deal that Spark are going to offload Spark Sport to TV NZ. Now, Spark did put out a statement on this. They confirm they are in discussions with TVNZ, but they say it's about a potential content partnering agreement. So if it's partnering, and it's not a sale, then does that mean you need two different subscriptions? You need Spark Sport and you need TVNZ if you're watching some sports on one service and other sports on another service. If it's not a straight sale of everything that Spark Sport has to TVNZ, do you then need another app, another streaming service in the,
or are they offloading it in? If they're offloading it in some way because it's too much trouble for them, and who actually has the infrastructure to film and things like that, it becomes an interesting proposition.
There's the other things with these streaming services and buying these rights, they have to find a way to film it and the production that comes with it as well. So obviously Spark are, thinking about what's best for them in that sense. So it'll be interesting. It's not just cricket as well. It's Formula One is a big one for them. People just want simple. You hear people complaining and being frustrated with these things quite a bit.
When the death wheel turns up when they're trying to watch something that's live,
and on the face of it, this doesn't seem like something that's making it more simple, but let's see how it pans out.
Okay. And we've got our final at the Football World Cup. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, obviously that second semi-final this morning, France beating Morocco, and a bit sad. I know you're a little bit sad not to see.
Yeah, I was kind of. Yeah.
Not to see Morocco go through, and it would have been a great story. But I mean, they have done remarkably well to make history already, haven't they? They've got through to a first African and Arab nation through to a semi-final of the World Cup. Pretty amazing achievement, and it's still a great story with what it is because you get France against Argentina, two heavyweights, Europe against South America. Messi against Mbappe, and like we talked about yesterday, that chance for Lionel Messi to have the crowning glory moment at the end of his international career anyway. And a final like this sort of gives us a tournament where we've had the best of both worlds. We've had those upsets, some exciting games throughout, but in the end we've got two powerhouse football nations in a World Cup final, which I think is, a pretty good result for football fans, sports fans around the world.
And would you like to give us a prediction, Clay?
Or
a hope?
Yeah. No, not really. I honestly don't really mind. I'm going to stick with Argentina. I think I've said it this week as well, Argentina, that it just has that element of...
We have to get up early for this one, don't we, Clay?
4 o'clock Monday morning, so yes, it is a World Cup final though, so I'm sure the people that really want to watch won't have too much of a problem dragging themselves out of bed.
Good one, Clay. Thank you. Clay Wilson with Sport there. Raising money to support pricks everywhere. The ACT leader and the Prime Minister are joining forces post-parliamentary insult to raise money for prostate cancer. Jacinda Ardern was caught out calling David Seymour an arrogant prick under her breath during question time earlier this week. Now the pair is selling a copy of the barbed comment for the cancer cause. To explain all, David Seymour joins us now. Kia ora, David. Exactly what is up for grabs here, please?
G'day, Lisa. Look, it's a printout of Hansard, Parliament's official record. And it's got my question to the PM, her answer and her comments at the end of the answer, all beautifully framed in a frame sourced from well-known New Zealand retailer Briscoe's. And it's signed by both me and Jacinda. So it's really a one-of-a-kind work of art by two budding Kiwi artists. You can find it on Trade Me. They've kindly put it on their front page. And all proceeds will go to the Prostate Cancer Foundation of New Zealand, who support people with prostate cancer and also do research into solving it. And as you say, we are using this event to raise money to support pricks everywhere.
Hey, the frame, it looks pretty basic, David. You couldn't have gone, I mean, forget arrogant, you know what. What about cheap, you know what?
Well, we're in a cost of living crisis here, Lisa, and I thought that anything too extravagant, in fact, as a good omen for this whole project. I went to Briscoe's. It said $29.99. It was actually only $17.99 when I got to the checkout. Amazingly, Briscoe's were actually having a sale, which I think is a good omen both for the whole project, the whole kaupapa, and also a good thing in a cost of living crisis. We wouldn't want anything too extravagant. We just want to get the job done, declare peace and help prostate cancer.
Hey, you signed this in the room together, right? Was it awkward?
Yeah.
Any awkwardness?
Not at all. I mean, I've had a relationship where I've known Jacinda for 11 years. We've debated each other in many different places for a year. We had a dueling newspaper column in the Sunday Star. I mean, obviously, I do what I do because I think a lot of the policies are wrong and are putting an awful lot of pain on people, and that's why we have an election next year. People can choose something different. But I've never held any animosity to her personally, her intentions or her sincerity. I've never questioned, and I think she knows that.
Hey, I'm seeing a picture of you signing it there in her office, and she's suitably decked out in a Labour red suit, and you look like you're dressed to go and play golf. What's up? Have you checked out?
No, not at all. I'm here talking to the important people in the New Zealand media, such as yourself. And actually, we've been delivering for the Wellington City Mission today, delivering foods and toys and presents that the ACT Party's been collecting up. That's something we do at that time of the year. And we've had our Christmas lunch for our hard-working staff who don't get a lot of recognition but do a lot of work in the background in Parliament. So, no, we've been pretty busy doing such things as that.
Good on you. Good on you for delivering the presents. Hey, just about the Hansard record, because this is interesting. You are actually the person responsible for getting that insult officially recorded, aren't you? Can you explain how that worked?
Yeah, well, I know that there's people that think politics is all games and bickering. Just close your ears for the next few seconds. But heckling is a little bit of a game where heckling is only recorded if the person who has the mic or has the floor acknowledges the heckle. Of course, this kind of happens. So it's a bit of a game trying to get them to acknowledge you so your barbs get recorded. But this was kind of in reverse. Once I heard that she'd said it, I asked the Speaker to ask her to apologise. That meant I'd acknowledge what she said, even though technically she didn't have the mic then. And because it had been acknowledged by someone who did have the mic when I raised the request, therefore the Hansard people wrote it down. So, again, if you think politics is all petty bickering, that's probably not going to impress you. But we do have rules that have evolved over hundreds of years of parliamentary practice, and that's one of them. And I just thought that if the Prime Minister's going to say it, it should be written down for posterity, so I made sure it was. And now it's all going to go to a good cause.
Did you actually hear it in the House? It was quite low level, muttered under the breath.
No, I didn't hear it, and I didn't raise that request with the Speaker until quite a bit later. It was actually 3 or 4 questions later after one of the journalists who sits closer to that end had gone back, checked the tape, confirmed what he thought he had heard, and then text me. So there you go. Not only are we working with people in the Labor Party to do good things, but we're also cooperating with people in the media.
Okay, before you go, David, very quickly, because we're out of time, how much would you like to get for this to raise for prostate cancer? Give me a figure.
Look, I just landed off a flight. It was just over $8,000. I want to see it go 20 plus. It's got 6 days to go, so a bit early, bit often. Front page of Trade Me. Great cause, making something that could have been bad into something good, supporting pricks everywhere.
Thank you, David Seymour. That is David Seymour, the ACT Party leader. It is 25 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And it's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa NINA, ko Nona Peltier. Hello, Nona. GDP figures, shall we talk about? Economy grew 2% in the 3 months ended September. What's the reason for that?
Well, it's hard to say why it grew so strongly compared with the forecast that had been made. So the Reserve Bank was picking 0.8%. And remember, these are historical numbers. Here we are.
We're looking in the rear vision mirror.
Yeah, definitely. And economists, many were expecting about 1%. So we got 2%. That's twice the rate that was expected. So that's quite substantial growth. Annually, it was an increase of 6.4%. Now, that's not too much of a surprise because the year earlier we were in a lockdown, and much of this growth has been through exports and primarily service exports. And what that is tourism. So when you start looking through the numbers, you start to see where the growth has been. It's been in like transport costs, freight, that kind of thing. So it's a lot of it is what we're exporting, but that doesn't necessarily address the core inflation part. So economically, the household spending was still up 0.3%, I believe. That's too much. The economy is basically overheated. And we don't have the capacity, really, to sustain much more growth. And that's one of the reasons, because of the inflationary pressures that come with that, is that the Reserve Bank has forecast, rising interest, official cash rate, 5.5%, a recession over 4 quarters, and then zero growth for a couple more. So overall, this isn't changing the picture. Just because we've had this growth doesn't really change much. In fact, it could mean that our interest rate hikes that the Reserve Bank has forecast could be even more sharply increased. So in February, the market's looking at a 75 basis point increase. So that's 0.75 of a percentage point. But if these numbers upset the Reserve Bank too much, they might go even harder, in which case we could be looking at a 100 basis point increase in February. That's probably on the outside. But certainly the world's appetite for hiking interest rates is widespread. It's not just here in New Zealand.
No, which brings us to the US Federal Reserve, and they've gone up again in terms of their interest rates. So what is that saying about the outlook?
Well, the Federal Reserve Chair is warning the U.S. economy, but really he's speaking to the world in many respects because it's the largest economy. He's saying there's going to be pain. There's no question about it. And he's saying that his forecast is for interest rates to perhaps hike to the same sort of levels that we're going to be seeing here in New Zealand, 5.5%, that sort of thing. These are the equivalent of an official cash rate. So on top of that, you've got the markup, the margins that banks add. So interest rates high, inflation high, and with Jerome Powell, who's the chair, he says okay, we're not so much interested in how fast we go. It could be that this is a long game so that the hikes won't be as severe as we may be anticipating here in New Zealand. But never mind, they're still going ahead. And that really plays into what the next thing we could talk about is, of course, the market. How did it react? Yep. So let's just say Auckland Airport, because I just want to pick that up because we did have a little bit there. Look, their share price ended down today, about 0.5%. Now, you could say, it was in a trading halt, whatever. But overall, the market did pick up a little bit, 17 points. So yesterday it was a 16-point gain. Today it's 17 points to 11,602. Against a backdrop of these economic numbers, the inflationary pressures that go along with it, Asian stocks actually sagged. So the fact that we're doing as we're doing, not so bad. The New Zealand dollar is also holding steady. And I think that's because a lot of these economic concerns about higher inflation and interest rates have long been priced into the market here. So we're at 64.4 US cents, 94.3 Australian and 52 British pence.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite, Nona Peltier there with Business News. It is 20 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro. Send us your thoughts on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Do get in touch. You can message us about the budget for Auckland that has just gone to the consultation phase. This is the Mayor's plan to sell off the Auckland Airport shares. Nona was mentioning them, as well as a bunch of other cuts which would save the city, he says, millions of dollars. David Seymour and the Prime Minister, getting together over that barb in Parliament to raise money for prostate cancer. Anything that's on your mind, 2101 on text. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address, checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines. Ko Evie Anō tēnei.
An independent review has found Immigration New Zealand was limited in what it could do to deport the New Lynn knifemen. 8 people were injured at the countdown in Lynn Mall last year before police shot Ahmed Samsudeen dead. The report found officials were bound by the Immigration Act, which means a potential terrorist refugee can't be deported if they're at risk of being tortured in their home country. The Racing Integrity Board will investigate how a 26-year-old apprentice jockey died after falling from her horse during a race in Ashburton this afternoon. Several other riders were involved in the collision that killed Megan Taylor. Karen Parsons, who owns the horse Ms Taylor was riding, says it was a terrible event with 4 horses falling. WorkSafe has been notified and the death will be referred to the coroner. Auckland Mayor Wayne Brown has come under criticism for speculating about a potential new Auckland Airport terminal. His public comments forced the stock exchange to briefly halt trading in the airport's shares today. During a live-streamed council meeting, Mr Brown said the airport was planning a major capital raise to fund a new domestic terminal, and that would dilute the council's 18% shareholding in the company. And the US Central Bank has put up rates by 0.5 percentage point. Interest rates in the US are heading to a level not seen since the steep economic downturn in 2007. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic around the country in the central North Island, work on the desert road between Waiudu and Rangipo is taking longer than it was supposed to because of the weather. State Highway 1 now won't reopen until 7 o'clock tonight in that area. And in the Coromandel, after a downpour, all the roads have now reopened after closing earlier today. Our next news and weather is at 6.
Thank you, Evie. And as Evie mentioned there, flooding in the Coromandel. So let's return to that story. Holidaymakers heading in that direction this weekend are being warned to check road conditions after heavy rains caused multiple road slips. Locals have been posting on social media pictures and videos of flooded roads and major slips. And joining us now is the local Civil Defence Controller, Gary Towler. Hi, Gary. How's it looking over your way?
Good evening, Lisa. Yeah, well, as reported on the news, we're pleased to announce that all our local and state highways are open, but there's a caveat to that because some of them, or most of them, are still down to one lane, or they have got stop-go, or there's still a bit of surface flooding. So we're out of the woods, but we're not totally back onto the road yet as 100%, but we're looking good for the weekend.
Has the rain stopped?
The rain has stopped. It has passed across. There's still a few spits, but the worst of it is gone.
Tell me a bit more about the damage to the roads. So in a lot of places down to one lane. What are we talking here, Gary? Is it slips or what's the deal?
So it's both slips and surface flooding. So once the rains go, the waters start to recede, and in some places, especially in the lower catchments that are quite close to the coast, it does take a while for that water to actually fully recede out with the tide. So these are the roads and the state highways that are most affected. But look, there's nothing. I think we've got one stop-go still out there, but the rest of it is just signposted. And those holiday makers, or people familiar with the Coromandel, they know, and they'll just take it easy and hopefully heed all the warnings.
Hey, Gary, what are the dodgiest kind of bits of road if people are keeping an eye out? Which are the worst?
So the most affected part of this event was on the eastern seaboard. So that's between Whangamata and Whitianga. And further north, up in those more isolated communities north of Whitianga. So it is the State Highway 25A and State Highway 25 are the ones that are is most affected. But we've also got to be mindful that over the next 24 to 48 hours, it is likely that more slips will come down, and together with some trees, etc. So we're just warning people just to be really, really careful. Check road conditions before you depart. If you're from Auckland or Hamilton or thereabouts, and just make sure it's fully safe to go.
So how much of a clean-up do you reckon you got on your hands then once the water recedes?
Not a lot. So luckily our contractors, we've got two contractors here, Higgins and Ventia, and they do a lot of preventative maintenance. They make sure that the culverts are cleared, and they're really, really good in that space because they've been around a while. So the cleanup is often just surface or cosmetic. They just got to clear the roads of the debris, and then afterwards, once things do settle down, they get the big trucks in and go to the dumps where they've dumped all the debris and take it away. So there is a bit, but it's nothing. This one won't be that bad. The biggest thing is that our catchments are saturated, so we are still in for some weather next week, and that is a bit of concern.
Gary, do you actually want visitors from out of town this weekend? Have you got capacity? Do you want them?
Oh, absolutely. The Coromandel's open for business, and the roads are open and the businesses are ready. There's no doubt about that, and the people are coming whether we're ready or not, because people are ready for a holiday. So yes, Coromandel's open for business, that's for sure.
Gary, you'll be ready for a holiday after this year. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lisa.
That is Gary Towler, who's from Civil Defence over in the Coromandel, taking a bit of a thrashing there. But as he says, all the roads are open. Just check the conditions. It is 14 minutes to 6. Kia mau tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Let's get to some of your feedback now. A lot of you getting in touch over Wayne Brown's comments and his budget. John Wayne Brown, this person says, shoots his mouth off again. The Mayor, good old Wayne, showing his colours now, another listener says. No wonder he won't front the media. He can't control his own tongue or his temper, says Jan. Auckland Mayor shamelessly scaremongering to get his own way. I think he has shown a complete lack of integrity and should resign. This is obviously over the halt in share trading around Auckland Airport after Wayne Brown made some comments about what he thought their plans were during a live-streamed council meeting. Kath has got in touch and is punting for the golf courses to go rather than the airport shares. We've had a bit of discussion about this, but let's put it out there again. Go for the golf courses, says Kath. Subsidising wealthy, $500 per round is being withheld from ratepayers. Actually, it was mentioned in their budget. I think there was about 2 or 3 council committees that wanted sale of the golf courses to be investigated further. Another person says loose lips sink ships. And this one from Alex before we move on. Hang on, doesn't this mean Wayne Brown was being misleading to push his agenda? Do keep your feedback coming, 2101 on text. The email is checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. The second release of Prince Harry and Meghan's docu-series drops later tonight.
I wasn't being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
Whoa, sounds pretty dramatic. Despite criticism, the new docuseries on the Duke and Duchess of Sussex is getting a lot of views on Netflix, and it's tracking to become the platform's most watched documentary. In its first week of release, Harry and Meghan has logged more than 81 million hours watched. CNN's Salma Abdulaziz has more.
It was a union that brought hope of change. An outsider and woman of colour breaking through to the very highest level of British society. The couple say systemic racism, deep-rooted in the UK's media and monarchy, both elite and predominantly white institutions, left them isolated and unheard. In a new Netflix documentary, they share their experiences.
Why should your girlfriend be treated any differently? Why should you get special treatment? Why should she be protected? And I said, the difference here is the race element.
Their wedding in 2019 was a celebration of Britain's multiculturalism.
There was a sense of us representing. There was that kind of understanding that we weren't just standing there for ourselves, that we were standing there for communities of colour.
I don't know,
But it's the couple's exit from royal duties and later a bombshell Oprah interview to explain the move that sparked controversy.
Did you leave the country because of racism?
It was a large part of it.
And if a member of his family will comfortably say, we've all had to deal with things that are rude and racist are not the same.
Talk of race and racism, often seen as a taboo topic in the UK, prompted a reckoning for some. For others, defensiveness, even anger.
This is a 2-hour trash-a-thon.
Piers Morgan, a top TV host, stormed off the set.
So, do you know what? That's pathetic.
You can trash me, maybe not mine.
No.
After a series of rants against Markle. And the UK Society of Editors issued a blanket refusal to acknowledge any bigotry at any level in the press. Critics called the statement willful ignorance. Buckingham Palace said they would address the matter behind closed doors. But Prince William made a public and rare off-the-cuff remark.
So we're very much not a racist family.
But for many others, the first modern royal of colour articulated a lived experience that resonated at a time of racial reckoning. In 2020, the UK saw huge demonstrations that demanded Britain confront institutional inequality. The Sussexes say they're driven by that same call to action.
There is a huge level of unconscious bias. It's education, it's awareness, and it's a constant work in progress.
Now unbound by monarchy, the couple are lending their voice to Britain's anti-racism movement and aggravating its detractors.
Fans have turned out in their hundreds to sports bars and restaurants across Auckland to watch the semi-final of the FIFA World Cup. France is heading back to the final for a much-anticipated match-up with Argentina after ending Morocco's historic run in Qatar. Our reporter Mohammed Al-Fashat joined fans to watch the action.
An air of optimism at the Fox Bar on the Viaduct that the underdogs might just take it home.
France beat England, so obviously we'd like to see France lose, but Morocco, a bit of the underdogs, really want to see those teams come through.
Morocco, mate, we can't let the French win, so we're pulling for Morocco today. Seeing as they knocked out England, we'll do what we can.
I'm very proud to see Morocco make it to this level. I mean, even if they lose, it's a great achievement. First time an African Arabic country had this.
A wave of Moroccan supporters also gathered at Ima Cuisine in Auckland CBD, cheering and singing for the Atlas Lions. But France capitalized from the 5th minute, with Theo Hernandez becoming the first opposition player to score past Yassine Bono in 6 matches. The excitement was short-lived.
Looks like the first goal was a bit early, but Morocco now is doing really, really good. And I think they will make it. Hopefully they make it. If they make it, they make it. If they don't make it, it's a football game at the end.
I think Morocco will come back. We'll finish on top, maybe 2-1 in the end to France.
Still got hope. You've got another 45 minutes to play.
Not bad. 1-1 at halftime would have been better, but hey.
Morocco returned in the second half by applying pressure to the opponent's goal. roared by tens of thousands of fans who dominated the 60,000-seat Albait Stadium, their players gave France a far from easy ride. The final score, 2-0. Morocco's World Cup isn't over. The team will play the third-place playoff match against Croatia at Khalifa International Stadium on Sunday. France will head into Sunday's title match against Argentina, looking to become the first team to retain the World Cup title since Brazil in 1962.
In the US, the central bank has raised interest rates again and warns it'll keep doing so to combat record high inflation. Despite this, inflation in the US actually cooled more than expected last month, giving some sign of hope. The BBC's Samira Hussain went out onto the streets of New York to talk to shoppers about rising prices.
New York City's holiday markets are open. Spirits may be high, and so is spending, but not necessarily on gifts.
What do you find has been getting more expensive, if anything?
I mean, everything. We're talking food, we're talking gas, clothes, gas, all, the whole gamut.
I spend a lot of money on groceries, and I know every single time you go to the grocery store, something is like a couple cents or $1 more than it was, I don't know, a month ago maybe.
Inflation has gone through the roof. It's insane. Gas prices are awful. Your food, you go to the supermarket, you buy 2 things and you're spending $30 and it doesn't make any sense.
She's not wrong. Inflation may be easing, but that's from its highest rate in over 40 years. To slow price rises, the Federal Reserve has hiked interest rates at a record pace.
Everything is going up. I'm just hoping soon it'll be a change and prices start going down, gas start going down a little bit, so maybe there's a trend coming.
That trend is actually being reflected in the latest data, which is showing that inflation may be peaking. But the months of spending more on basics means even merry market-goers are having to make some choices.
Budgeting big time. So I'm, not buying certain things anymore and just really very money conscious right now.
I've been budgeting more. Yeah, so I'm trying to track my spending. Even if I am spending a little bit more, at least I'm keeping track of it, trying to cut back.
Remember where we are with the rate of inflation. It's still super high, and the toll it's taking on consumers still remains really pretty big. So what they're paying for now is still 7% higher than it was previously. And that's why the Fed is still raising interest rates.
If you won a ticket to go anywhere in the world, where would you go? Well, one Colorado man has come here to New Zealand. He told our reporter Tom Taylor why.
When 26-year-old Coloradan John Moore won free return flights with a blank destination, he had no hesitation about where to go.
It's always been on the bucket list, and then I ended up winning a plane ticket to anywhere in the world, so an obvious first choice. It's a bit of a journey, so was able to make the trip with that little bit of help.
We catch up at Auckland waterfront bar St. Alice on a scorcher of a summer's day at the beginning of his New Zealand tour. John loves his job at Denver-based venture capital firm Morrow, but getting a month off work's a lucky break. Unlike most countries, the United States has no minimum holiday requirements.
I haven't personally taken vacation in a few years, so it's even hard for me to unplug.
Subtropical Auckland's a far cry from snowy Denver. John's been making the most of it with lessons at Muruwai Surf School, a road trip to the beaches of Coromandel, all while seizing every opportunity to sample fresh seafood. What had you heard about New Zealand before coming here?
It truly is seen as such an idyllic place back home. Everyone says it's really got it all. It's like if Colorado had a beach.
The next day, I meet John in line for the ferry to Waiheke Island. The weather's turned. Views of the harbour are obscured by drizzly rain, but he's undeterred.
It's not bad. It's a little damp, but nothing too uncomfortable. Got the light rain jacket on as recommended and ready to get out there.
Having saved his money not paying for flights, he's able to spend it on the things that matter, including a package deal of lunch, wine, and an all-day bus ticket for the island. Auckland ticked off. Next stop, South Island.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Christchurch. Please remain seated until the aircraft is positioned and stopped outside the terminal.
After a few days at a tiny house in the Garden City, John's headed to the huts and hikes of Fiordland. When I call him, he's busy preparing his pack.
I got a stove and the gas, so I didn't bring that originally. I got
We call it cooler, but I've learned since a chili bin.
Although some huts are fully booked out, others, like that at Lake Alabaster, operate on a first-come, first-served basis. He's been putting in some training to make sure he secures a bunk.
I've been going on some morning runs in Christchurch to try to make sure I'm prepared for the long journey in, especially with a heavier pack on.
While the holiday's been largely stress-free, John's run into some trouble trying to make bookings. With the number of international visitors at its highest level since March 2020, and Kiwis also starting to go on holiday, he's found it impossible to rent a self-contained van, or even to hire a surfboard in some places.
Coming back next time, I'll know. You just have to book way ahead, especially for this time of year.
With 2.5 weeks left on his trip, John already knows for sure that he'll be back. He just might have to fork out for flights next time round.
Tom Taylor reporting there. On Twitter, the New Zealand Surf Report account has sent us a picture of the Whangamata golf course, if you could call it that. All you can see basically is a lake with a little small green island surrounded by water. Seems quite right that it comes from the Surf Report account because it could be a beach or a lake or just a giant body of water. Let us know how you're going over there. 2101 on text if you're in the Coromandel. What is it like where you are? On the subject of Wayne Brown and the Auckland budget cuts. This listener says it's Auckland. Who cares? Burn. Okay then. Another says they agree with the airport sale, get debt down and keep the rates below government inflation. Another says the majority of Auckland deserve what they get from Wayne Brown. He showed his true self after being elected. He's refused to face the media. He had a media stand-up this afternoon. Chris says this was not the wisest thing to say if the Auckland Council are hoping to sell their airport shares for the highest price. Yeah, interesting.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. Ngā mihi o te pō ko Evie Ashton tēnei. Britain's defence chief says Russia's ability to carry out a successful ground campaign in Ukraine is rapidly reducing. Tony Radakin made the comment during a speech in London, as the BBC's Jonathan Beale reports.
Admiral Radakin said the war in Ukraine was not just a threat to European and Atlantic security. He said it was linked to other challenges in the world, connecting countries that had given Russia either military or tacit support. Most of his immediate focus, though, was on Russia's war in Ukraine. The chief of the defence staff contrasted Russia's losses on the battlefield with Western resolve to continue supplying weapons to Ukraine. He predicted the war would only get worse for Russia, which he said was now facing a critical shortage of artillery munitions.
An investment specialist says Auckland's mayor needs to choose his words more carefully in the future. Wayne Brown told a council meeting today that the council's shares in the airport would lose some value soon because the airport company is seeking a capital injection to fund a new domestic terminal. That forced the stock exchange to briefly halt trading in the airport's shares before the company said it has no plans for an equity raising. Mark Lister from Craig's Investment Partners told Checkpoint no real harm was done.
Few people at Auckland Airport probably had their day interrupted. The market would have been left a little bit confused. The brokers maybe were a bit inconvenienced. People that were maybe trying to buy or sell at that particular time would have been inconvenienced.
Mark Lister says that by the end of the day, the airport's share price had moved only marginally. A Bay of Plenty GP says a national security check has left a sour taste about his family's application for residence. Firas Nasser and his wife Charmaine Marshall-Dean, who's a nurse, applied for the fast-track visa in March. With 3 children under the age of 11, he says they'd like to start feeling more settled, buy a family home and plan for schools.
We are professional people. We just work here. We've got integrity and morality. And we've got professional obligations. We work day in, day out to help patients and people, and we save lives.
Firas Nasser says he understands why national security checks matter, but they need to be done in a timely way. Immigration New Zealand says its systems failed to send requests for checks or they weren't received. 3 days of national mourning have been declared in the Democratic Republic of Congo for the victims of flooding and landslides that have affected an estimated 40,000 families. At least 120 people have died. The BBC's Emery Makumeno reports from the capital, Kinshasa.
Most victims were taken by surprise by the mudslide that swept away their homes that were built on the sandy hills in the north of the city. The impact on infrastructure is also significant. The main road linking the city to the port was cut in two, isolating the capital from essential supplies. The government announced that it would move people from homes in similar areas to avoid a repeat of Tuesday's disaster.
4 men have been charged with a Gisborne assault the police describe as brutal. A 61-year-old man suffered serious injuries when he was beaten in his home by a group of people last month. The police say the level of violence was appalling and the man's wife was left traumatised. He's still in hospital in a stable condition, and the police say he's slowly improving each day. The 4 men, all in their 20s, will appear in the Gisborne District Court, charged with wounding with intent to cause grievous bodily harm and with burglary. Free fare advocates say the government's decision to end half-price fares by April will take the country further from its emission reduction goals. The scheme, which was started 9 months ago, will be phased out during March. A spokesperson for the Free Fares lobby group, Kate Day, says that with Waka Kotahi data showing a 7% shift towards taking public transport, these new habits should be held on to.
If this policy is scrapped, how are we going to get that mode shift back? We've got ambitious targets of the public transport patronage that we need to get in this country, and we need all hands on deck, all tools in our toolkit to achieve that. So we need affordable fares and investment.
Kate Day says the government should retain the scheme and work towards making fares totally free. An historic Canterbury pine tree appears to have been deliberately poisoned. The Waimakariri District Council says one of the 100-plus-year-old pines on Park Terrace in Waikuku has had 20 holes driven into its trunk, and poison was probably poured into them. Community Projects Officer Mark Quant says it's highly unlikely the tree will survive, and it could cost close to $10,000 to remove.
I'm gutted. We've lost another mature old tree. It's not a native. It doesn't have that sort of native tree significance or ecological significance really, but it's part of our history, and it's part of the landscape of that area, and it's a real loss, and we can't get that back.
Anyone with information about this are asked to contact the police. And the Invercargill Immunisation Centre will close tomorrow after giving more than 75,000 COVID vaccinations in just over a year and a half. At its peak, the centre at the Civic Theatre gave 557 doses in a single day. It also provided boosters and vaccinations against other illnesses, including measles, mumps and rubella. Te Whatu Ora Southern says more than 70 providers currently offer free vaccination against COVID-19 in Otago and Southland, including 8 in Invercargill and Bluff. That's the news.
This Saturday morning, the psychedelic origins of Santa Claus and those flying reindeer, according to fungi expert Lawrence Millman. The producer who led Prince Andrew to that slaughter of an interview. And we'll talk best books of the year with Kate Goldie and Laura Croach. Call Kim Hillaho. Join me Saturday morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And we're funded through New Zealand On Air. We're on air on rnz.co.nz and on your mobile. You're back with Lisa Owen on Checkpoint next. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. For Northland and Auckland, fine spells and isolated showers. Coromandel Peninsula and Bay of Plenty. Periods of rain with some heavy falls, easing tomorrow evening. From Waikato to Wellington, including the Central High Country, also from Gisborne to Wairarapa, occasional rain easing this evening. Scattered showers tomorrow, mainly in the afternoon, when some could be heavy with possible thunderstorms. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, occasional rain today, a few showers tomorrow. Westland and Fiordland, rain at times, possibly heavy with thunderstorms tomorrow morning in Fiordland and elsewhere tomorrow afternoon and evening. For Canterbury, scattered rain clearing this evening. Cloudy tomorrow with isolated showers, some heavy with possible thunderstorms south of Ashburton in the afternoon. Otago and Southland, cloudy periods, scattered showers in the afternoons and evenings with thunderstorms and hail possible. And Adair Kohu, Chatham Islands, low cloud, drizzle from this evening. The time is 7 minutes past 6. I'll have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Nā mihi Evie, no mai hoki mai, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The FIFA World Cup final is set. Argentina will take on France on Monday morning after the French beat a stubborn Moroccan side 2-0 in today's semi. France are the defending champions, and making back-to-back finals is a rare achievement in the most watched sporting tournament in the world. The BBC's Dan Rowan has more on today's game.
Their team had already delivered one of the World Cup's greatest ever underdog stories. But now the champions themselves stood in their way. Within 5 minutes, the favourites flexed their muscles, the ball falling to Theo Hernandez, who, despite the tight angle, expertly hooked home. Morocco behind for the first time this tournament. With their fans generating a sizzling atmosphere, Jawad El Yamek then went agonisingly close to a spectacular equaliser. Despite only being in the job 3 months, coach Walid Regragui has instilled a formidable spirit in his side, and while dominating possession, Morocco was struggling to find a way through. But Didier Deschamps is aiming to become just the second coach to win the World Cup twice. And then, having been on the pitch for less than a minute, with his first touch, substitute Randall Kolo Muani booked France's place in the final. The youngster securing the presidential seal of approval. Morocco never gave up, but their fairy tale was over after a journey here that will never be forgotten. France through to another final. Their bid to become the first team in 60 years to secure back-to-back titles continues.
And while it was joy in Paris, it was heartbreak in Rabat. Take a listen to how these French and Moroccan fans reacted.
Well, a bit disappointed, but so proud of the team. They played very well, a great journey. So yeah, quite proud. All Morocco can be proud. Moroccan worldwide. I have friends all over the world. I have friends, and we are very, very proud of what had been achieved.
Back to back, what else can we say? And the team, people came off the bench and did everything that they did. This team is so good. This team is so deep in players. We're so talented. I'm proud to be French.
Well, I feel amazing. We played amazing. The defense was extraordinary. Hugo Lloris just came out, saved everything. It was very stressful, but we played well.
I feel good! Why? Because the French people know I'm weak, I'm good to the final! Wow!
I'm happy for both. We're happy! People are France! We're happy for France!
Not sure what the words were there, but you got the gist. And that final between Argentina and France kicks off at 4 a.m. on Monday. To Peru, where the government has declared a 30-day nationwide state of emergency. It comes as supporters of ousted President Pedro Castillo continue to block many main roads and airports around the country. Mr. Castillo was impeached last week for alleged corruption and detained for trying to dissolve the parliament. The BBC's Naomi Choi-Smith has the latest.
Tanks and troops take over the streets in Peru's second largest city as a 30-day state of emergency comes into force. Peru's defense minister claims he had no choice after scenes like this. Protesters have blocked airport runways, roads, and other critical infrastructure in the past few days as anger boils over at the country's turbulent politics. At least 7 protesters have died in clashes with police. The unrest erupted after former President Pedro Castillo was ousted from office last week. He tried to dissolve Congress and was swiftly impeached. His successor, Dina Boluarte, has tried to calm tensions by offering to bring elections forward.
Que mantengamos la calma.
We must remain calm. Peru cannot be overflowing with blood. We've already lived through this experience in the 1980s and 90s, and I believe that we don't want to return to this painful history.
But words aren't enough for Castillo's supporters. They want him released and fresh elections straight away.
Dina Boluarte is not our president. Let the people elect her. Then I will recognize her. But the people didn't elect her. The people elected Pedro Castillo, and he is our president.
Castillo is still in custody and in legal limbo after a judge denied his appeal. He could face charges of conspiracy and rebellion. And as the deadly violence spreads to the capital, Lima, Peru's political crisis deepens.
A former Russian soldier is seeking asylum in Europe after defecting from an army accused of committing war crimes in Ukraine. In his first TV interview, he tells CNN's Fred Pleitgen what he's witnessed during the war and a warning parts of his story are disturbing.
After the Russian army was forced to retreat around Kiev, the carnage came to light. Bucha, Borodyanka, and many other Kiev suburbs littered with bodies. Ukraine especially blames one Russian unit for alleged crimes here, the 64th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade from eastern Siberia. Now, a deserter from that unit is speaking to CNN.
Actually, big lie for me. Like 24 February coming, okay, everyone goes to war.
Nikita Chibrin defected from the Russian military and fled to Europe, where we met him in a secret location. He shows me his military booklet with a stamp signed by the commander of the 64th Motor Rifle Brigade, Colonel Azatbek Omurbekov, known in Ukraine as the Butcher of Bucha. Chibrin says he and his comrades were given shoot-to-kill orders, even though Russia has denied any wrongdoing by its forces around Kiev.
We had a direct command to murder those who divulged our positions. If someone had a phone, we were allowed to shoot him.
Chibrin says the unit was deployed to Belarus shortly before the invasion, allegedly for training. The soldiers had no idea they would soon advance into Ukraine, and he says they weren't prepared for war.
Everyone
thought they could be like Rambo. Those who said, I will be shooting Ukrainians easily, piece of cake. When they went to the front line and then they came back, they were like, we don't want no war.
Chibrin says he too came under Ukrainian artillery shelling and showed us video from near the town Lipivka, west of Kiev. He tells me he refused to fight because he was opposed to the war and that his commanders called him a coward and reassigned him to menial labor tasks in the rear echelon. He says he didn't witness the mass killings the unit is accused of, but did witness plenty of crimes against Ukrainian civilians, including looting.
They weren't trying to hide it. They did this very openly.
Yeah. They we want to hide it, so everything what they see. Whoa, I want this looting. I want this. Everything makes the loot, and cars too make the looting.
And even rape.
I saw rapists running around being chased because they were committed rape. The guys who did rape, I saw them run. Then I learned they were rapists. They raped a mother and a daughter. They were never jailed, just fired, just like that. Go!
CNN has reached out to the Russian Defense Ministry for comment, but we haven't received a reply. Russia has consistently denied its forces were responsible for crimes against Ukrainian civilians, and President Vladimir Putin issued a decree praising the 64th Separate Guards Motor Rifle Brigade for, quote, heroism and bold actions. Nikita Chibrin fled Russia while on leave. He gets emotional when talking about his 4-year-old daughter he left behind. He says he wants to testify against his commanders before an international court to shed light on what happened in the war he never wanted to be a part of.
The European Parliament is engulfed in a corruption scandal, one of the worst to hit Brussels in decades. Belgian police last week carried out raids and arrested 4 people in connection with alleged payments and gifts from Qatar to parliamentarians and their staff. Prosecutors have also found stashes of money, as the BBC's Katja Adler reports.
Cases full of cash seized by Belgian police linked to key figures in or close to the European Parliament, prompting hair-raising questions about trust and whether EU influence can be bought.
The investigation concerns the suspected corruption of European parliamentarians by a Gulf nation. The purpose of the bribery was to favour this country in the financial and political decisions of the European Parliament.
The scope of the investigation is spreading. So what do we know so far? Vice President of the European Parliament, formerly a glamorous TV presenter in Greece, is making the most headlines. This is her last month praising Qatar's record on migrant workers' rights.
Qatar is a front-runner in labour rights, abolishing kafala and reducing minimum wage.
Just as her fellow MEPs passed a resolution deploring them. She's accused of taking bribes to try to influence votes here in Qatar's favour. Qatar denies involvement, but this scandal shines an uncomfortable spotlight on the World Cup host.
FIFA World Cup is Qatar.
A reminder of the multiple allegations of corruption surrounding its successful bid, though no concrete evidence came to light. Back in Brussels, how were the suspects there caught, according to police? It sounds like something out of a scandal-filled crime novel. On Friday, Belgian police stopped the father of the Vice President of the European Parliament trying to leave this Brussels hotel with a suitcase crammed full of cash. Now, his daughter protests her innocence, but whatever happens in this case, it is going to have far-reaching implications on how decisions are made at the European Parliament just down there and on the tens of thousands of lobbyists who work here in Brussels trying to influence those decisions.
There are too many loopholes, and we think there are several countries that engage in these kind of practices of basically buying the support of MEPs, and it looks like Qatar, if it is Qatar, may have got a bit overconfident in their approach to this. The sums involved are so huge that this was inevitably going to leak out.
Vote is closed.
A shocked and shamed European Parliament voted overwhelmingly yesterday to strip its Vice President of her title. The EU's reputation is at stake here, said the bloc's leaders in Brussels today for a planned summit. In the current energy crisis, they look to gas-rich Qatar to help them.
It is 19 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. 10 years ago today in the US, dozens of children were killed in the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary School. Since then, school shootings have continued at an alarming rate across the country. It's a crisis that shows little sign of easing. CNN's Brian Todd reports.
Barack Obama today called it a, quote, visceral blow, the darkest day of his presidency. The former president, in a statement, relaying what he calls the sorrow and anger he felt 10 years ago today, when 20 children between the ages of 6 and 7 and 6 adults were gunned down at Sandy Hook Elementary School. On that day, Mr. Obama couldn't contain his anguish.
They had their entire lives ahead of them. Birthdays, graduations, weddings, kids of their own.
Obama now says the closest he came to being cynical about America
was the utter failure of Congress to respond in the immediate aftermath of the Sandy Hook shootings.
In the days immediately following the shooting, many believed Sandy Hook would surely be the catalyst for tighter gun laws. But Congress failed to pass a proposed assault weapons ban or a bipartisan measure for expanded background checks. A decade later, the shooting in Uvalde, Texas this past spring. 19 students and 2 teachers killed in their classrooms. A survivor of Sandy Hook, who's now only 17 and has been fighting for gun control in recent years, tells CNN Uvalde felt personal.
It really affected me because I felt like I failed. And just to know that like something so similar happened again is very tiring.
Uvalde, another instance when a shaken president pleaded for an end to inaction.
When in God's name we do what we all know in our gut needs to be done.
In the wake of Uvalde, Congress did pass some of the most significant gun control legislation in decades, providing incentives for states to enact red flag laws, which allow for guns to be denied to people perceived to be threats to themselves or others, imposing enhanced background checks for gun buyers between the ages of 18 and 21, barring people convicted of domestic violence against partners from buying guns, and providing new mental health resources. But many, including President Biden, see that as just a tiny step. Why has so little been done in the decades since Sandy Hook?
You have Republicans and Democrats very divided over what kind of gun restrictions are acceptable. And for a broad swath of Republicans, no restrictions are acceptable. They see it as an infringement on their Second Amendment rights.
For the parent of one Sandy Hook victim, a decade of frustration on top of oppressive grief.
I don't know how much more our country can take and why we keep going through that same cycle over and over again of thoughts and prayers and lack of action.
What does the future of gun control look like in the United States? Analysts say with control of the House about to switch hands from Democrat to Republican, any significant legislation on the national level, very unlikely.
4 people have died after a small boat carrying migrants capsized in the English Channel in freezing conditions. More than 40 people were rescued in a massive operation conducted by the British and French navies. The BBC's Mark Easton reports.
The Mayday call came around 3 a.m, dark and below freezing, an extraordinary rescue effort to save the lives of dozens of migrants in a sinking dinghy in the middle of the English Channel. A fishing boat first on the scene, pulling people from the stricken inflatable, men, women and children screaming for help. RNLI lifeboats, the Royal Navy, French Navy and a Coast Guard helicopter joined the operation. With daybreak, the search for survivors intensified, rescue teams trying to spot anyone in the cold waters of the Channel. But within a few hours it became clear the search was for bodies, and later one of those who didn't make it was brought ashore at Dover. Lifeboat crews tried to resuscitate some survivors on the quayside. A helicopter took one adult victim to the William Harvey Hospital in Ashford, where he later died. Another adult also received treatment and is thought to have since been discharged.
450,000 people.
In the House of Commons, the Home Secretary reflected the mood of shock at what had happened in UK waters just off the Kent coast.
These are the days that we dread. Crossing the Channel in unseaworthy vessels is a lethally dangerous endeavour. It is for this reason, above all, that we are working so hard to destroy the business model of the people smugglers, evil, organised criminals who treat human beings as cargo.
Migrants from other dinghies have been brought ashore in Dover during the course of the day. Almost 45,000 have now crossed this year, despite the risks and the costs. Those rescued today said they'd paid people traffickers £5,000 for a place on a flimsy dinghy and the promise of a better life in Britain. The sea flat calm when they set off from the French coast in the early hours, but with a 2-metre swell in the middle of the Channel.
How do we stop people making these perilous journeys? There are opposing strategies. Refugee agencies say the answer is to make it easier for asylum seekers to seek refuge in the UK so they don't have to make the crossings in the first place. The government is intent on making it much more difficult, criminalising and swiftly deporting anyone who arrives by an irregular route.
By adopting an approach which is all about punishment and control, it doesn't stop the crossings. We need an approach which is about compassion above control and which recognises the reasons people have to flee.
The owner of the fishing vessel which first arrived on the scene spoke of his pride at the crew's actions.
Horrific incident, but our guys there were proud that they did a cracking job, rescuing 31 of those guys, yeah.
It's just over a year since 27 people lost their lives in the Channel, a tragedy that prompted both UK and French governments to say they were stepping up efforts to defeat the people smugglers. But since then, the criminal gangs have expanded their operations, while the desperation of those who would buy their services appears undiminished.
Children who dream of being spies are the target of a new online Christmas card released by the UK spy agency GCHQ. It features code-breaking puzzles for youngsters to solve, the type of skills used by real-life agents. The BBC's Tim Muffet showed it to kids at a school in London.
Elm Green School in South London. The students' mission, should they choose to accept it, try and solve the GCHQ Christmas card puzzle.
It's different to what we normally have to do in school.
Yeah, but that's how you get the 3 words. This little bar right here.
We don't do much like code breaking, so it's something different.
GCHQ is the UK's intelligence, security and cyber agency. Traditionally, each year it includes a brain teaser on the Christmas cards it sends out. But this Christmas, for the second year running, it's also set a festive, mind-bending challenge for school pupils.
If 2 equals growth and 6 equals exist, then 9 is what 7-letter word which describes what you'll be doing with your presents on Christmas Day?
How are you finding it?
We're finding it quite exciting, actually. Yeah, it is really fun. Thinking outside the box and actually making your brain think a different way.
I thought it would be quite maths orientated, but it's actually like quite a lot of code breaking and puzzling and stuff like that.
So these puzzles have been set by an actual intelligence officer who works for GCHQ. Now, we can hear from him, but for obvious reasons, he's going to appear in the form of a cartoon character called Colin.
So this year, the Christmas card has puzzles covering different skill sets, including languages, engineering, analysis, and code breaking.
First for group, maybe that would be what.
So the qualities needed are ingenuity, analytical skills, perseverance, and an inquiring mind. In a sense, solving the challenge replicates what we need to be able to do in GCHQ, but in a fun way.
Along with MI5 and MI6, GCHQ says it wants to widen its recruitment net.
What do you make of these puzzles?
I think they're really good. Many of our students wouldn't have heard of GCHQ prior to this challenge. And understanding that in actual fact they have the skill sets to be able to go into such areas is really good for them.
Has this made you think about a career in that world?
Definitely, yeah. I've always been into like problem solving, like critical thinking, or like what you got to do to solve things. Have made me like look at that side like in much more detail.
It's making me more interested in what this could lead to.
Hundreds of schools will be taking part in this challenge today. Anyone initially bamboozled should take heart. In this classroom, what to many seemed mission impossible became mission accomplished.
I've just been eyeballing some of those puzzles during that story. Clearly not cut out to be a spy. Some of your final thoughts before we head off on the Mayor, Wayne Brown, Auckland's Mayor. The big problem with today's brouhaha that people are not picking up on, Jim says, is that Mayor Brown spoke his own opinion as if it was a fact. Surely anything he says now must come under suspicion. And this on Harry and Meghan's series, a right ex-royal yawn fest. It's all about the dollars, says Ray. Ray of sunshine, that is. That is about all we've got time for. The late news team's going to keep you updated throughout the night. You can check out anything you missed on Checkpoint on Spotify, Apple or wherever you get podcasts from. Ko te kaupapa tuatahi pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. New Zealand Poet Laureate Chris Teese joins the First Up team for their final show of 2022 to reflect on what's been a pretty tough year. That is well worth getting up early for. Poet Laureate Chris Teese. Kia pai tōpō, have a wonderful evening. We're back tomorrow.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Good evening, tēnā tātou, ko Evie Ashton tēnei. The Racing Integrity Board will investigate a young Canterbury jockey's death this afternoon. 26-year-old Megan Taylor died after her horse fell during the second race at Ashburton Racecourse. 4 men in their 20s will appear in the Gisborne District Court after what police described as a brutal attack on a couple in their home last month. A 61-year-old man remains in hospital. An investment specialist says Auckland's mayor needs to choose his words more carefully after comments on airport expansion briefly halted trading in the airport's shares today. And one person who is selling shares is Tesla boss Elon Musk, $5.5 billion worth of shares in Tesla in the past few days. Those are the headlines. Trending Now is next.
The end of his reign as the world's richest person.
Since the Twitter deal, it's been a black eye for Musk. He's essentially gone from a superhero to a villain in the eyes of Wall Street.
The end of half-price public transport.
We're going to have more congestion, more pollution and more carbon emissions as a result of putting those fares back to their previous price.
The end of the parliamentary year.
On the first day of Christmas, Chris Luxon sent to me a badly timed holiday in Hawaii.
But we're still here. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
Kia ora anō, you're still with Evie Ashton and the time is 29 minutes to 7. You're listening to Trending Now and we begin with the detail. Tonight, the case of Baby W ended up in the international spotlight. How did it happen?
Kia ora, I'm Emile Donovan, and today on The Detail, the story of a baby with a serious heart condition who unwittingly became a pawn in a much wider cultural war.
The baby in urgent need of a heart operation is still waiting for a resolution on his parents' request that only blood from unvaccinated people can be used if he needs a transfusion.
One involving a former TV newscaster and one of the world's most infamous media figures.
Update: New Zealand government steals baby from parents after they demand unvaccinated blood for heart surgery. I want to thank you, and I want to thank Liz Gunn, who we're about to bring on, because we're all in this together.
Now, the operation has gone ahead.
The baby at the centre of a blood row has been given the heart operation he needs, but only after intervention from a High Court judge and police.
But what does this story tell us about power and personal convictions and misinformation in 2022? Today on the podcast, the twists and turns in the story of Baby W. Charlie Mitchell is a reporter for Stuff who's been following this story since late November.
That's when this issue sort of becomes public, and it becomes public via Liz Gunn, who is a former journalist